Okay, Jen, welcome to this week's Coaches Corner. Thanks so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Delighted to be here, Sarah. Thanks for asking. It's exciting for the majority of coaches I work with because they're either back getting excited and getting the admin ready to go back. There's a few that are still on furlough, but it isn't far away. So there's a light there somewhere for people to get back moving, but there are still concerns when you do get back moving. As coaches are so in the job for this reason, to develop people and support people. Everybody's concern is the athletes. So I'm hoping today we can have a good conversation about the coaches.
Yeah, and I think so when this video goes out, which will be next week for us, that's when netball will be back. So that's kind of like a really exciting time. So yeah, next Monday we'll see just all of our kind of netball activity open up outdoors. So it is a really exciting time for our netball family. And I guess much like other sports, I think we've been in a position where we've done a bit of a survey, like capture the mood of the nation. And some of the things that coaches were saying and players, to be fair, was around kind of just that going back and how we're feeling about it. It's been a long time, hasn't it? Like you said, some of the coaches that you've been working with. And I guess it's more just about capturing, for us, that sense of, how do people feel and how can we kind of pay more attention to that? So that's obviously what I wanted to chat to you about today. And I think, like for me, like you suggested, it is about kind of being mindful about it. I think we've got really good at talking about mental health and like being much more open about it, and it is a more normalized conversation. But for me, it's more about like what are the nuances of it, and like how can we kind of pay attention to it, and how can we like really promote that?
Yeah, no, listen, like 100% see what you're saying there. And the coaches I speak to on a weekly basis, they do feel bombarded by all the terminology that's floating around. They're very mindful, is a brilliant way. They're very mindful of the words, their environment, the 5 ways to well-being, because we speak about that a lot. But I think it's actually stopping to think what that word means to them, or those words mean to them. And like, even if we take the word care as on a whole, like different people's experiences of care in coaching and out of coaching will mean that they prepare for this return in a different way. So it's really good to pause for a moment and think, well, actually, what do I need going through this transition? What do my athletes need? And what are the expectations on my shoulder? Because the noise is going to come and it's going to be buzzy, but we got to be really mindful of kind of getting our finger on the pulse of the people that are there in front of us when we do return.
Yeah, and I guess so. There's 2 aspects of it, and I was talking to someone about this week, that I feel like as coaches, so like we're coaches and the people that we work with are coaches, we're really good at paying attention to our athletes. Like we're really good at that. Like that's what drives us. And we're, I think we could still be better. I think we could still pay attention to more specific things around like mental health in particular. But like, I don't feel like we're very good at paying attention to ourselves, and like, so sometimes if I'm coaching or whatever, and I think about the session, I'll call you and I'll be like, oh, this is how the session went, and leave a voice note and stuff. But I think for other coaches, maybe there's not a sense of like how to take care of themselves, when they return. Like some of the sessions next week, I return to coaching next week, I'm pretty sure like my session is going to be not great, because I just won't know but like I'm okay for that. I'm prepared for that.
Yeah, but that is so important. I know we're having a little giggle about it, but it may not go right. And it's not just your typical, if I notice an exercise or activity or whatever is not going, I deviate from the plan. Super. That is part of you, great coaching and all that. But for you to stop and think, how am I preparing to enter into this session? Am I going to be okay? Like what are my success criteria without getting too formal on it? Like, what's a good session look like? And if you get out the other side and you stop and you think, right, did anyone injure themselves? And I know I'm giggling on that. That's actually quite serious with load. Did anyone injure themselves? What did I see, feel, and hear from the session? Am I able to support everybody by just being myself? Or as close to that as I can in this situation, because you are nervous going back, and I know from coach conversations, people who haven't coached in 12 months are like, Am I a coach? Am I a good coach? Why am I coaching? What's happening? And we've, talked through those. But yeah, I love the honesty that you've brought there.
So I guess for me, like what I'm thinking about going into next week is immediately my thoughts go to like how will they feel, like how will the athletes feel, how will the players feel, and I'm very aware of that, and I'm very like conscious of that. Fortunately we've got kind of Matt, our S&C coach and stuff, so he can help, and there'll be other people that maybe don't have that luxury, but we've got loads of stuff on the VNC where we've talked about physical load and stuff like that, and Ned and some of the other guys from the Roses have been kind of putting some work out. So a lot of coaches have asked about that, about physical return, so we've kind of looked after that a little bit. I guess for me it's also about being aware of like how I feel, so I probably haven't paid that much attention to it. We had a staff meeting last night, we talked about maybe like what we're going to do, the logistics of it, and like who will do what does that look like. We actually probably didn't have a conversation about like how we feel. I think there was a general sense of like feeling excited, but I'm really conscious of like maybe how the girls are going to feel about interacting with me, and then maybe how I feel about the success of that session.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think not to repeat ourselves, but going back to just being mindful and being calm and actually giving yourself permission at the start of the session to just see and be and feel like, what am I seeing? What's the interaction like? Can I make an effort? Because I know we know that in some cases, we are that masked person. We may have had a really crappy day, but we're putting on that mask, and that might need to happen if the nerves are there or people are, you're feeling a little bit jittery. So actually making an effort to connect with everybody. And that could just be a little hi and hello, or whatever the new version of a high five is, or a fist pump or something, to just connect, because people haven't had that. They haven't been in around people. And then you're adding kind of the pace of sport or different activities you're going to do. One of the coaches noticed also that there was an assumption, this was a break between the lockdowns where people were allowed in this particular sport to get back, that he noticed that there was a disconnect between the athletes. So even though they'd been on Zoom, they hadn't really been connecting the social chit-chatty that happens with people when they get to a session. So allowing time for that, and then kind of saying at the end of the session, a little bit of feedback, not your recall of what you learned, but just like how for you, and if there is somebody who says, I'm really struggling, know where your signposts are. I think empathy for me is at the foundation of everything, but the awareness of what you're noticing. You mentioned that earlier on. What am I noticing here? And not diving too deep into it straight away and go, oh, this person's off, I need to make a note, I need to do this. Yeah, everybody's going to be in some shape or form present and a little bit distracted in the first session. So yeah.
I think as coaches, like I know, like me and the coach that I work with, at times, like when we're in the heat of the moment, the season's going by, the games are ticking over, training and stuff like that. Like when X Factor was on, we'd be like, girls, can we stop talking about X Factor now and just get on with what we need to get on with? Because time feels really precious. And I think this time has afforded me an opportunity where I think, do you know what, the girls, they as much as they might not want to say it, I think they will have missed us, and they will have missed that routine, and they will have missed the interaction with each other, the just general chit chat and conversation. And I'm very mindful, like even when we do like stuff at work for me at the moment, and where they're like, oh yeah, you've got 5 minutes, just have a chat. I'm like, 5 minutes is nothing. I can waste 5 minutes so easily. Like it has to be more. If I want to improve connection, I'm thinking that time has to be more meaningful, and sometimes it has to be without our control. Like we have to let them own it and be okay with that.
Yeah. And I think it's, you get that blend back. Like I'm sure people will be thinking about in, the granular detail, what will I do in the session? And some will decide to go one extreme of let's play games, and others will be like, oh, there might be some sort of, injury or something, I'll pull it back. But whatever you decide to do, just, trust yourself and back yourself, and be present in the moment, be in the room. And if you feel like something needs to be changed or altered, then you can do that. But like, they will be excited. That reconnection is so powerful. Sport, we know, is a vehicle, and netball is an incredible sport. So you have that like extra energy when someone loves doing what they do. they come back and they'll be playing. There's, I'm biased because having any kind of ball in a game for me is exciting, but it's a vehicle for them that they haven't had for conversation. And we did speak about this during the different lockdowns, that we now have a chance where we're seeing more of an opportunity to be active for a longer period of time in the sport, that possibly there won't be another lockdown. So I think it's important to just enjoy it, not to be overrun by all the worries that are there.
And but like, not to kind of like go back to that, but I also think it's important, like we've had lots of conversations. I was talking to someone about this last night, like I think it's really important to like listen to yourself. So if you are worried, just listen to that and be okay with that. And maybe, like I'm in a fortunate position where I am part of a coaching group. I'd like to think that people have someone there, and just talk about that. Sometimes it's okay to just verbalize, what I feel nervous about tonight, and just kind of own it, or like I feel apprehensive, or sometimes I'm not great at that with the girls. So like I think there's a lack of understanding sometimes with them, that they're like, Sarah's not on top form, and I'm like, I've had a busy day. And I think sometimes I could do better at kind of saying to them where I'm coming in at the session on, and like being okay with that. But I think kind of going into those sessions next week, one of our Roses Academy S&C coach said something which will linger with me forever. He's like, you can always put the cake back in the oven, like just don't overdo anything, like don't overdo anything physically, maybe don't overdo anything mentally for them, just kind of keep building that cake, and if it's got to go back in, it's got to go back in.
That's a brilliant analogy. I love that. I will steal that. Steal that. But no, it's really true, isn't it? And like you mentioned earlier on about us having a conversation after a game or a training session, I think it is important for people to think about who that person or people or location might be. Sometimes it doesn't need to be another person. It might just be a journal record or answering a couple of questions to reflect on the session. But there will be things coming up, whether it is a competition or training, that speeds up everything, and having an opportunity to pause after those and go, I did a good job today because I got people to turn up. Let's think of the reality of that. I checked in with everybody. I know everybody's doing, which makes athletes feel, I don't know if people have asked their athletes or their players over time, like how you like to be coached. But a lot of what I hear back when coaches do ask that question is, once I know the coach cares about me, then I'll accept in the training that there may be some yelling sometimes, or there may be silence, and there may be whatever, but it's the care part behind that I think is important. So, we're all very passionate being in the world of sport, and those are the key things to remember, that we need to enjoy it as much as the athletes do, or else, it's a really long haul.
I think going into next week, where I think if we're using outdoor facilities, particularly netball and stuff, and it might be kind of like a get out because, maybe there's other teams there and stuff. I think, that those questions that you just kind of like reflected on there about, maybe like it's okay to ask them, like, what do you want from me next week, or what are your expectations? Because I know a lot of players on our survey were really concerned that maybe coaches would come bring them back and be just like, go hard physically, and they don't necessarily feel okay with that. So I think it's good to kind of get rid of that anxiety of like, listen, we're not going to go hard next week. It's not going to be, we're not going to be asking you to like land, jump, turn, and twist if you haven't done that for a long time, or we're not going to get you running like absolute beast in you, or burpees, all of that. Like, just talk about that. And I think also being smart with your time, like that, you can do that on WhatsApp, and so then when people come into the session, you don't have to talk about that then, and people can, how are you, I've missed you, and we can be all like virtual huggy kind of thing, and then let's get back and use that time really effectively to do what we've all really missed, which is netball.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that balance is, people will be excited to get the adrenaline going and get back into different, exercises and activities within the session, develop the skills or refine or see what the back garden shooting has done on the court with a little bit of competition. So I think that balance is important. If anybody needed something, there's a UK Coaching have done this CARE acronym, and I think we've discussed a good bit of it here, but there's a respect side of that where, if I could pause on it for a second, you're not going to go asking intrusive questions. That's not the agenda here of like, people diving in. And I know it might sound really obvious, but letting it happen naturally and kind of asking twice, mind had this campaign for Ask Twice, I think it was, that you'd say like, how are you? And then now how are you really? But, you know, you can mix up the questions and you can connect with the person, which is really important to nourish that relationship. But if somebody does come back to you and say, you know, actually, I'm not okay, that it isn't you that's taken on that load at the end of the session. Yeah, initially you are, and you know, you're not kind of saying, well, it's completely, you know, it's completely on my back and my shoulders here. That you're able to signpost, or you're able to say, well, thanks for sharing that. Let's have a conversation about that now or another time when you're ready. And that it is in the coach, because I do feel in the conversations I have with coaches that sometimes they feel like they need to be the S&C person, the coach, the nutritionist, the psychologist, and probably with a big assumption here, but a lot of webinars that happened, there has been a lot of CPD that's come, and people have all their notes and books and ready to go, right, I'm opening that chapter on this because I learned that. So yeah, just kind of listen with the intent to understand and seek kind of full clarity, and then the confidence side of that, like, unless it's something really serious, that you are listening and they know that they have trust in you to do that. So I thought that was important to mention, because there may be people who, like you said, on the back of mental health coming to the surface a little bit more, people may feel confident, important person in that person's life.
Yeah, and I think so part of that, just being available is so important. Like, you know, we will all be in those situations. Like, there's been plenty of times, you know, where I wished that I've said something to someone and, like, you know, I'm not okay, or, you know, even like coming off that call yesterday, you know, maybe could I have said something to the rest of the staff group? There were like 8 of us on that call, and maybe I could have said something, and maybe someone else would have gone, do you know what, I feel like that, so I could have done better with that. But I think there's a couple of things there for me. Like, I really learned that from you, because you say all the time, and I remember you saying to me really early on, like, thanks for sharing. And that's such a valuable thing, because I think acknowledging that someone was brave to step forward and share how they were feeling, or share something that, and doesn't have to be quite personal. I think if someone's taken the time to go, this is how I'm feeling, and this is kind of, you know, what's important to me, I think just by saying thanks for sharing is a way of acknowledging that step that they've taken to share that. But being available, and like, so maybe a good thing to remember is asking twice, because that shows that you are being available and you're ready to listen. But I think one of the things that's always quite scary for anyone, not just coaches, is you don't necessarily have to have the answer. And I think that's what sometimes stops us from asking twice, because then when someone shares, we're maybe not quite sure what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, great point. I think there's you know, don't feel the pressure to have the answers. Like, we don't have them in coaching anyway. Like,
Yeah.
we don't know everything about everything. We are the experts of ourselves. So do notice what's going on inside. But like, have your signposts, or have your people around you that you can say, listen, you know, I need to make a record of this if that's necessary, or I just need to understand a little bit more what I've heard tonight. And I do genuinely feel privileged when people share. And sometimes that's all they need to do. You know, that, like, with linking to the answer point, I've learned over the years that when I do say thank you, that's enough for people. That it isn't that I need to go, but have you thought about, like, the relationship I have with my mom? For years, she'd say something, I'd be like, have you tried this? She'd say another thing, have you tried that? And then I kind of stopped at one moment and was like, just let her share, you know. And it rippled on from there, where people have the courage to share something, whether it's in a group that they're not familiar with, or this team that they're getting back, or the coach in a one-to-one, or an assistant coach, whoever it is, you know, just thanks for sharing is really powerful. I feel anyway.
Yeah, and you know, one of the other greatest lessons I've learned, probably in the last 18 months, is like, when someone says something. So there might be people that have returned, you know, people have had a stressful time at work and stuff. Maybe people don't need an answer, because one of the greatest things that I learned sometimes is, like, to say to people, do you need a response, or do you just need to say, like, because, you know, sometimes people don't even need an answer from you. They might just want to be like, do you know what, home's a bit tough at the moment, I've been doing X, Y, and Z, my partner's not doing this, work's rubbish. But they don't need you to solve any of that, they just want to get it out.
Yeah. Here's one. What do you think about having some sort of development plan early on when people get back in to focus them? What do you think people's approach should be going back into coaching? Is it the just be present and have fun, which we were talking about earlier on? Or is there benefit and use to kind of saying, right, we're back now from here to here, let's make a couple of notes? What are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean? What kind of notes on just?
Or like maybe something they'd like to focus on, or something they'd like to refine, like not necessarily as stringent as like setting some goals, but I wondered for some if it would be useful and useless. There's my Freudian slip. If it would be useful to distract people from maybe the emotion or hype that might be around the return to play, to go, I'm just going to focus in the sessions on, being present and enjoying it, but maybe my shooting or maybe positioning on something. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always, especially when we're in a situation where we might not return to full-on competitive play. So we might see a lot of training for a little bit, which isn't a bad thing because it allows us to prepare mentally and physically and gradually build up. But then what might happen is we could get a sense of frustration because we're not seeing any measure or output of our hard work. So yeah, I think anything that's like that to do with goals or kind of seeing some progress, I think is important. And I think at any point, I would like to think in this period, most definitely, but there should be that it shouldn't be coach led. It's not like, right, Jen, I need you to be shooting at least 90%. Like, you might say, do you know what? Like, actually, I think I can get to about 80, 85. And I think that's good because that's you leading that. And I think people want to feel in control. There's a lot of stuff that's been out of our control for a long time. So I think giving back some control and, or maybe someone's going to come back who's a shooter and gone, do you know what? Like, I want to play in centre court for a bit. I want to kind of run around. I've got a lot of energy. Please, can you give me an opportunity to try and play in centre court? Like, I want to try that new. And I think that's important.
Yeah, no, so important. Great point. Yeah.
Okay, let's just kind of wrap it up then in the sense of, so maybe your 3 top tips for coaches returning next week. If you could say anything to them, like, what would it be?
Enjoy, go slow, and notice.
Good ones. Yeah, that's good ones. And I think with that notice, I think really cling on to what you said before about what do you see, what do you hear, how do you feel in that noticing, because that is important. It's not just about kind of how they're performing physically, it's what they're saying, how they're interacting. That's a really important part of noticing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a lovely way to finish. Thank you. Thanks so much, for joining us. I've really appreciated it, and I really wanted to kind of take this opportunity to just, I think, take a moment for the coaches so that they could take a moment to kind of be like, do you know what? It's going to be okay, and we're going to be back in our happy place. The players are going to be back in their happy place, and I think it will be okay. It will be okay.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Sarah, today. Great topic, and I love speaking about it. And I hope everybody has an absolute ball getting back.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.